So in 1969, the World Health Organization launched an effort to study schizophrenia outcomes in 9 different countries. It was called the International Pilot Study of Schizophrenia, IPSS. They looked at 3 developing countries, Colombia, India, and Nigeria, and 6 developed ones, Denmark, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, the United States, the Soviet Union, and Czechoslovakia. The outcomes were assessed by looking at the percentage of time with psychosis symptoms, the type of remission after each episode, and the degree of social impairment. And they rated the patients on a scale of 1, which went best, to 7, worst. At the 5-year follow-up, India had the most success, with 42% of cases reporting best outcomes, followed by Nigeria with 33% of cases. By contrast, the developed countries had poor showings. Best outcomes were seen in only 17% of cases in the United States and in fewer than 10% in the other developed nations. So obviously, the developing countries had a different approach to treatment that was resulting in better outcomes for their schizophrenia patients. So what was this? In 1978, the WHO launched a 10-country study, this time primarily enrolling people suffering from a first episode of schizophrenia. And this is a passage from Robert Whitaker's book, Anatomy of an Epidemic, talking about the results of the study. At the end of 2 years, nearly 2/3 of the patients in the developing countries had good outcomes, and slightly more than 1/3 had become chronically ill. In the rich countries, only 37% of the patients had good outcomes and 59% became chronically ill. The findings of a better outcome of patients in developing countries was confirmed, the WHO scientists wrote. Being in a developed country was a strong predictor of not attaining a complete remission. So there was something going on in developed countries that was preventing complete remission for most patients. Putting together what we've talked about Jung's ideas regarding psychosis and it being a process initiated by the psyche to bring about some upgrade change of the personality, we can guess that this wasn't occurring in the developed countries, but was occurring in the developing countries for some reason. So the WHO investigators tracked antipsychotic usage in the second study, thinking that maybe the patients were doing better in the developing countries because they more reliably took their medications, but they did not find this. They actually found that only 16% of the patients in the poor countries were regularly maintained on antipsychotics versus 61% of the patients in the rich countries. Moreover, in Agra, India, where patients arguably fared the best, only 3% of the patients were kept on an antipsychotic. Medication usage was highest in Moscow, and that city had the highest percentage of patients who were constantly ill. And then in 1997, WHO researchers interviewed patients from these first 2 studies. So it was 15 to 25 years after the initial studies, and they found that these better outcomes were maintained. They held up for the general clinical state, the symptomatology, the disability, and the social functioning. So the people in the developing countries were better on all of these measures. And actually, they found that 53% of the schizophrenia patients were simply never psychotic anymore, and 73% were employed. So again, here are results that do not align with modern conventional psychiatric wisdom and understanding in the treatment of schizophrenia, but we can align these results with Jung's model of the psyche and schizophrenia and what it was attempting to achieve, and that if the reorganization of the personality takes place, the psychological growth that the psyche is requiring comes to fruition, the process comes to a completion, individuals can recover.